Hello friends, in this video lecture we'll be discussing a very important process of human reproduction, that is parturition or childbirth. Okay, that's parturition or childbirth, right? So when the fetus is fully developed, all the organs on every part of the body is completely developed, and the period of pregnancy is almost complete over, period of gestation is over, then what happens? The baby comes out of the womb of the mother. That process of coming out of baby from the womb of the mother, in common words, is called as, or in layman's language, is called as birth or parturition. Now, parturition, what is it basically? Parturition is expulsion of fully mature fetus from the uterus of the mother at the end of gestation. Okay, so what is parturition or childbirth, or it is also called as labor? It is also called as labor. So what is it? It is the expulsion of fully mature fetus from the uterus of the mother at the end of the gestation. In case of human beings, the period of gestation is 9 months, or roughly we say 280 days, right? So once the fetus is fully formed, there is no space for this fetus now to grow within the womb of the mother. So fetus must come out of the body of the mother, and for that very process certain events take place within the body of the mother, and those events are controlled by fetus itself and placenta itself, and those events, those reactions culminate into the expulsion of the baby from the mother, from the uterus of the mother. So what happens basically, now we know that ये parturition जो है, it is controlled by both nervous system and it is controlled by endocrine system. So we say that the mechanism of parturition is a neuroendocrine mechanism, that is both the nervous system plays its role, okay, sensory receptors play their role in the ejection of the fetus at the end of the pregnancy, at the end of the gestation from the body of the mother, and at the same time hormones play a very important role for the expulsion, for the parturition of the baby. What happens when the fetus is fully mature, okay, at the end of the gestation, that is around 9 months plus minus few days? What happens? The fetus and placenta, they secrete certain chemicals, and those chemicals ultimately lead to their expulsion. The process begins from the placenta. Placenta secretes a little amount of estrogen. It secretes a little amount of estrogen. Okay, the estrogen causes the mild uterine contractions. At the same time, placenta also secretes a chemical called as placental CRH. It's called as placental CRH. CRH stands for corticotropin releasing hormone. Corticotropin release hormone. Corticotropin release hormone. This CRH is secreted by the placenta towards the end of the pregnancy, and this CRH, it goes to fetus. It goes to the pituitary gland of fetus, okay, and the pituitary gland of fetus, okay, it reaches to the pituitary gland of fetus, and the pituitary gland of fetus releases ACTH, okay, pituitary gland of fetus releases ACTH, adrenocorticotropic hormone. Now this ACTH, it goes to the adrenal gland of the fetus. It goes to the adrenal gland of the fetus, and once the adrenal gland of the fetus receives this ACTH, जब ACTH adrenal gland के पास पहुंच जाता है, then what happens? The adrenal gland secretes two important things. One is called as cortisol, okay. One is called as cortisol. That's very important during pregnancy. It maintains the level of glucose and carbohydrates for the respiratory process, so that a lot of energy is released, and it also suppresses the inflammatory reactions. Then it also secretes, the adrenal gland also secretes a very important androgen that's called as dehydroepiandrosterone. That's called as dehydroepiandrosterone. Okay, so the adrenal gland of the cortex, Okay, so the adrenal gland of the fetus secretes two hormones. It secretes cortisol and it secretes dehydroepiandrosterone, a very important androgen. ये dehydroepiandrosterone जो है, it goes to the body of it goes to the placenta, and placenta में ये dehydroepiandrosterone जो है, it is converted into estrogen. It is converted into estrogen. So what happens? The amount of estrogen increases in the blood. एस्ट्रोजन की क्वांटिटी फीमेल बॉडी के ब्लड में बहुत ज्यादा इंक्रीज हो जाती है. ये एस्ट्रोजन जो है, ये एस्ट्रोजन बाद में दो काम करता है. दिस एस्ट्रोजन प्लेज टू इंपॉर्टेंट रोल्स. नंबर वन, it increases the number of receptors. It increases the number of receptors for oxytocin. ऑक्सीटोसिन के लिए यूट्रस की जो लाइनिंग है, ओके, इन द यूट्राइन लाइनिंग द एस्ट्रोजन, इंक्रीज्ड कंसंट्रेशन ऑफ एस्ट्रोजन increases the formation of oxytocin receptors. Oxytocin receptors, ये oxytocin receptors जो है यूट्राइन लाइनिंग में बहुत ज्यादा बन जाते हैं. Okay, this one. Second, estrogen जो है, it induces the formation of prostaglandins. It induces the formation of prostaglandins. Okay, prostaglandins. So estrogen जब ब्लड में आ गया ज्यादा, ये दो काम करता है. नंबर एक, ये यूट्रस में, यूट्राइन लाइनिंग में जो ऑक्सीटोसिन के रिसेप्टर्स हैं उनका नंबर बढ़ाता है. सेकंड, ये और एक काम करता है, ये प्लेसेंटा को स्टिमुलेट करता है टू सीक्रेट प्रोस्टाग्लैंडिन्स. प्रोस्टाग्लैंडिन्स क्या काम करेंगे? प्रोस्टाग्लैंडिन्स जो है ये सर्विक्स में जो कोलेजन फाइबर्स होते हैं उनको डाइजेस्ट करता है और सर्विक्स जो है, सर्विक्स बिकम्स लूज. Cervix becomes loose, cervix becomes dilated, it becomes expanded so that it is easy for the fetus to come out of the cervix, right? At the same time, estrogen causes it stimulates the contractions in the uterine lining. जब uterine lining contraction start करता है तो एक stimulate हो जाता है, एक stimulus rise हो जाता है. That stimulus is called as fetal ejection reflex. We come to the flow chart. Now see, fetus and placenta, ये क्या करते हैं? They secrete certain chemicals. वो chemicals का जिक्र हमने किया. I have mentioned all those chemicals, all those substances, right? Now all these chemicals, okay, these chemicals are called as fetal ejection factors. So the chemicals, so the hormones released by the placenta and fetus at the end of the pregnancy or towards the end of the gestation are called as fetal ejection factors. Now these fetal ejection factors, what do? They increase the contractions of the uterine lining. They increase the contraction of the uterus. Okay, mild contractions. These mild uterine contractions are called as fetal ejection reflex. Fetal ejection, because these contractions, they mean that now the fetus is going to stay no more within the womb of the mother. The fetus has to come out of the womb of the mother. The fetus has to come out of the uterus of the mother because there is no space now. Now fetus is already much grown. It cannot be accommodated within the uterus of the mother. So anyhow it has to come out. For that very purpose, what happens? The uterus begins to contract under the influence of fetal ejection factors. Okay, now this contraction is called as fetal ejection reflex. Now when the uterus begins to contract, okay, since there are certain nerve fibers, okay, sensory nerve fibers present within the wall of the uterus, those nerve fibers, sensory nerve fibers are called as these are called as Stretch receptors. These are called as Stretch receptors. So when the uterus begins to contract, these Stretch receptors are stimulated, and these Stretch receptors go to the hypothalamus. Hypothalamus secretes oxytocin. Okay, the oxytocin is stored in the posterior pituitary. Now we say directly that the mild uterine contractions or the fetal ejection reflex, it stimulates posterior pituitary gland to secrete oxytocin. Now when oxytocin is released, what happens? We know that under the influence of estrogen, the number of receptors for oxytocin has increased. So oxytocin binds with those receptors in the uterus, and uterus begin to contract vigorously. Strong uterine contractions begin so that a force is generated to push the baby out of the uterus. These contractions are so strong. These contractions, okay, strong contractions, they constitute labor. This is called labor. Okay, basically when the uterus contracts vigorously, female feels pain. It's a sort of hard work. Okay, female is doing, passing through, and that's why this work is called as labor, and it is produced under the influence of oxytocin. So when the uterus is contracting, at the same time what is going on, the cervix is becoming dilated under the influence of two hormones, relaxin and prostaglandins. Prostaglandins are certain type of hormones. So prostaglandins, they digest these prostaglandins. What do? Prostaglandins क्या करते हैं? They digest the collagen bundles within the cervix so that the cervix becomes easily dilated, it becomes expanded, and the relaxin also plays the same role. It helps in the relaxation, in the softening of the cervix so that a wide canal is formed through which fetus can come out easily. Okay, so when this cervical dilation, it lasts for many years, 6 to 12 hours. Then when the cervix is dilated, now the time has come when the fetus has to be expelled out, when the fetus has to be pushed out of the body. That pushing out of the fetus out of the body, out of the uterus, is called as expulsion. So cervical dilation phase, it is preceded by expulsion phase. This also lasts for some 10 minutes or maybe for many hours. Then when the fetus comes out of the body, okay, then the placenta, after some time, after some say 5 to 10 minutes or after 30 minutes, the placenta also detaches from the uterus and it also comes out of the body, and that coming out of placenta is called as after birth. So as such, we see that how this process of parturition is completed, and we see that it is both under the control of nervous system and under the control of hormones. Now let us see this whole process in a series, in a manner of events, in a series of events. First stage, or we can say in stage. So the parturition, the process of parturition takes place in 3 stages or 3 steps. Step number 1 or stage number 1 is called as dilation. This is the stage. Okay, in this stage what happens? The cervix, the cervical canal, and the birth canal as well, cervical canal plus vagina, they become wide. Particularly cervix, it becomes wide. That plug which was formed during pregnancy, that plug is removed, and the cervical muscles, they relax under the influence of relaxin and under the influence of prostaglandins. The collagen lining is digested and cervix becomes soft, so that when the fetus comes out, the head or the body of the fetus is not damaged, so as to make it possible that fetus comes out very conveniently and comfortably, ताकि fetus आराम से मदर की बॉडी से थ्रू सर्विक्स आराम से बाहर आ सके. ये डायलेशन वाला फेज जो है, डायलेशन का मतलब है ना चौड़ा होना, तो दिस फेज इट लास्ट्स फॉर सम 6 to 12 hours. During these 6 to 12 hours, what is going on? The cervix is becoming soft and loose. Okay, it becomes dilated, and during this phase, during these 6 to 12 hours, okay, when the baby is beginning to come out through the cervix, what happens? The amnion that covering around the fetus, it ruptures. Amnion जो है, जो embryonic extra embryonic membrane है, ये rupture हो जाता है, और वो amniotic fluid जो है, that oozes out through the vagina. तो ये amniotic fluid जब ooze out होता है तो वो काम करता है. Number 1, ये जो birth canal होती है, that is cervix and vagina, इनको ये lubricate करता है ताकि कोई friction ना हो, so that the baby does not feel any sort of friction. It is very complex and very intricate mechanism. बहुत ही complex mechanism है कि fetus को एक बड़ा 2 to 3 kgs जो है fetus, it will come through a small canal. So you see how much the magnitude of expansion of the cervix, कितना cervix को expand होना पड़ता है, और इसीलिए जब ये process start होता है तो amnion जो है, amnion rupture हो जाता है. Amnion rupture होगा, amniotic fluid is lost, amniotic fluid oozes out through the birth canal so as to lubricate the birth canal, so as to make it sure that the fetus does not suffer or is subjected to any sort of friction. Then comes the second phase, that is the phase of expulsion. जब birth canal पूरा चौड़ा हो गया, lubrication भी हो गया, amniotic fluid भी हो गया, अब baby जो है उसका head जो है, head to head cervix होगा. Normal जो position है वो क्या है? कि फीटस का हेड टुवर्ड्स लोअर साइड में टुवर्ड्स सर्विक्स होता है, ये हेड बाहर आना शुरू हो जाता है। एंड दिस कमिंग आउट, ये जो फेज है, जिस फेज में फीटस अब क्या बॉडी से बाहर आएगा, यूट्रस से बाहर आएगा थ्रू बर्थ कैनाल, दिस फेज इज कॉल्ड एज फेज ऑफ एक्सपल्शन। एक्सपल्शन, एंड दिस फेज यूजुअली lasts for 10 minutes or maybe 1 or 2 or 3 minutes. It depends. It varies from lady to lady. So minimum is 10 minutes, and it can be as long as many hours. So during this phase, जब fetus को expel करना बॉडी से, uterus is contracting very vigorously. इस दौरान uterus बहुत strongly contract करता है, and it is during this period as well that the female is feeling a lot of pain. Female is feeling lot of pain. And now when the fetus comes out, when the head, what is the first part of the fetus that comes out? It is the head part. Head पहले बाहर आता है, and as soon as the head of the fetus comes out, is expelled out of the body, the baby cries. The baby cries. Why does baby cry? Baby cry क्यों करता है पहले? It's very interesting fact कि देखिए, before birth जो baby है, जो fetus है, it derives its nutrition as well as it gets its oxygen supply from the blood of the mother through placenta. Now जो fetus बाहर आया तो placenta detach हो गया। अब placenta जब detach हो गया तो ऑक्सीजन की सप्लाई कहाँ, मदर की बॉडी से नहीं आएगी, इसलिए बेबी को क्या है, ब्रीथ करना है। होगा क्या, जब प्लेसेंटा डिटैच होगा, अब मदर की बॉडी से ऑक्सीजन नहीं आ रहा है, जब ऑक्सीजन नहीं आ रहा है तो फीटस के अंदर क्या होगा, कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड की कंसंट्रेशन बहुत ज्यादा होगी। कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड की कंसंट्रेशन जब बहुत ज्यादा हो जाती है तो मेडुला ऑब्लांगेटा में जो न्यूमो रिसेप्टर्स होते हैं, ठीक है, वो एक्टिवेट हो जाते हैं, और जब वो एक्टिवेट हो जाते हैं, मेडुला ऑब्लांगेटा में जो रिसेप्टर्स हैं, जब वो एक्टिवेट हो जाते हैं तो वो क्या करते हैं, जो इंटरकोस्टल मसल्स है, ओके, रेस्पिरेटरी मसल्स है, उनको कंट्रैक्ट कराते हैं। जब कंट्रैक्ट, क्योंकि कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड बहुत ज्यादा अंदर हो गया तो कंट्रैक्शन स्ट्रांग होती है, इतनी ज्यादा स्ट्रांग कि बेबी जो है बहुत ज्यादा ऑक्सीजन अंदर लेता है। ओके, ये बहुत ज्यादा ऑक्सीजन जब अंदर लेता है तो इट फील्स लाइक बेबी इज क्राइंग। बेसिकली बेबी इज नॉट क्राइंग। व्हाट इज बेबी डूइंग? बेबी इज ब्रीदिंग वेरी फास्ट. Baby is breathing very fast, and that fast breathing resembles crying, and that's very important. That's very important. If the baby does not cry, if the baby does not cry, if the baby does not take first breath immediately, what will happen? The oxygen supply will be deficient within the body. The baby will suffer from hypoxia. Baby will suffer from hypoxia. Fetus will suffer from hypoxia, and it is going to affect the brain, mental capacity of the baby. So it's very important that the baby must take first breath. If the baby does not take first breath because of many factors, maybe because of absence of a kind of viscous matter within the lungs called as surfactant, अगर surfactant नहीं बना था तब भी बेबी क्राई नहीं करेगा, डिफ्यूजन नहीं हुआ, गेस्ट एक्शन नहीं हुआ, then that problem is called as respiratory distress syndrome. रेस्पिरेटरी डिस्ट्रेस सिंड्रोम। तो हम बात कर रहे थे कि बेबी जब बाहर आता है तो उसका पहला पार्ट जो बॉडी से बाहर, दैट इज हेड, इफ समटाइम्स हेड इज नॉट डाउनवर्ड्स, हेड जो है, हेड जो है फीटस का, ये मदर की बॉडी से, यूट्रस से बाहर नहीं आ रहा है, बल्कि बेबी की टांगे जो है, लेग्स ऑफ द बेबी आर कमिंग डाउन, दे आर डाउनवर्ड्स, एंड द बेबी इज कमिंग आउट थ्रू लेग्स. This called as breech presentation. This called as breech presentation. What is breech presentation? Breech presentation is a condition in which the baby is not coming out of the body of the mother or out of the uterus through headwards, but through legs from hind side. So legwards, legs पहले बाहर है. This is called a breech presentation, and this is very harmful and very dangerous. That's why जब breech presentation होता है तो उस वक्त क्या करते हैं, जो डॉक्टर्स है, जो मेडिकल प्रैक्टिशनर्स है, जो सर्जन्स है, वो क्या करते हैं, सिजेरियन सेक्शन और सर्जरी करनी पड़ती है, और सिजेरियन सेक्शन से जो है बेबी को, फीटस को बाहर निकालना पड़ता है. ओके, ड्यूरिंग दिस बर्थ, दिस एक्सपल्शन फेज, दिस वन मोर चेंज टेक प्लेस, दैट इज जो बेबी का हार्ट होता है, फीटस का हार्ट होता है, फीटस का हार्ट जो है, उसके जो आरिकल्स है, आरिकल के दरमियान जो इंटर आरिकुलर सेप्टम होता है, during the fetal life the inter-auriculum septum is having a pore. तो right and left auricle के दरमियान एक pore होता है, that's called as foramen ovale. That pore is called as foramen ovale. और जब बर्थ हो जाती है, before birth, ये foramen ovale जो है ये close हो जाता है, it becomes closed. If फॉर सम रीजंस ये फोरामेन ओवल क्लोज नहीं हो गया, तो क्या होगा, ऑक्सीजनेटेड ब्लड और डीऑक्सीजनेटेड ब्लड मिक्स अप होगा, और ऐसा बेबी जब उस ऐसे बेबी की बर्थ होगी जहां पर हार्ट होल, जिसको बोलते हैं हार्ट होल डिजीज, बहुत कॉमन है। हार्ट होल डिजीज क्या है, जो फोरामेन ओवल है ये क्लोज नहीं होता है। बिकॉज ऑफ दैट थिंग, जब बेबी की बर्थ होगी तो उसकी बॉडी में जो है ऑक्सीजनेटेड ब्लड और डीऑक्सीजनेटेड ब्लड मिक्स हो रहे हैं, तो उसकी बॉडी में ऑक्सीजन की डेफिशिएंसी होगी, बिकॉज ऑफ विच द बेबी टर्न्स ब्लूइश, एंड दैट इज कॉल्ड एज blue baby syndrome. That condition is called as blue baby syndrome. So sometimes what happens, during the birth there is a lot of pain felt by the woman, felt by the lady, pregnant lady, लेकिन कभी क्या होता है, बहुत ज्यादा एक्सट्रीम पेन होता है during birth, and that extreme painful birth is called as dystocia. That's called as dystocia. तो ये कंडीशन है, dystocia होगा means extreme pain during birth, okay, extreme pain during the process of parturition, या अगर breech presentation होगा, यानी बेबी जो है थ्रू हेड नहीं आ रहा है, थ्रू लेग्स आ रहा है, तो इन कंडीशंस में क्या किया जाता है, सिजेरियन सेक्शन किया जाता है, ओके, सर्जरी की जाती है, और थ्रू सर्जरी फीटस को बाहर निकाला जाता है। ओके, when the phase of expulsion is over, that is baby has come out, now the fetus has come out of the womb of the mother, then what happens, after some 5 to 30 minutes or half an hour, जो प्लेसेंटा है वो भी बाहर आ जाता है। Placenta also comes out of the womb of the mother, and this coming out of placenta from the womb of the mother is called as afterbirth. This is called as afterbirth. जब प्लेसेंटा भी बाहर आ जाता है, उसके बाद up to 14 days फीमेल का जो वजाइना है, थ्रू वजाइना थोड़ा म्यूकस और ब्लड जो है ऊज आउट होता रहता है up to some 40 days. That mucus and blood is called as lochia. That's called as lochia. So as such, we learned that how the process of parturition is controlled by nervous system and endocrine system, and what are the different stages in which the process of parturition is completed. In the next video, we'll be discussing the process of lactation. Thank you very much.